300 children were buried alive beneath the earth. The men who put them there only wanted one to come out. They got their wish, and they would spend the last moments of their lives wishing they had not, because the thing that finally climbed out of that pit was not a child anymore. It had white hair and skin the color of a drowned man, and eyes the deep, patient red of fresh blood. It had a name once, a soft name, belonging to a soft boy. But that boy died somewhere in the dark, and what took his place learned only one thing down there: how to kill the people who made him. This is the story of the Reaper of the Drifting Moon. And it begins, as these stories always do, with a child who trusted the wrong stranger. Before the dark, he was nothing, less than nothing, an orphan with no family name, drifting from town to town across the murim, the great martial world. It is a beautiful word for a brutal place, a land of sword sex and proud masters, of blood feuds settled in the street where power was the only law, and a child with no one to protect him was worth less than a stray dog. He had dark blue hair and tired brown eyes that had already seen too much, and he had learned the only skill that kept orphans alive. He had learned to disappear, to press himself into the corners of crowded markets, to move through a room without leaving a ripple, to want nothing, ask for nothing, and be noticed by no one. It was a sad little talent, born of fear. He could not have known that one day it would make him the most feared assassin the martial world had ever seen. But that day was very far away. On the day our story truly begins, his gift for going unseen failed him exactly once. A stranger on an empty road met his eyes and smiled. A warm smile, a kind smile. The boy, who had been shown so little kindness, hesitated. And in that single heartbeat of hope, the world went black. He woke in a place with no light at all, not dim, not shadowed, black. The kind of black that presses on your eyes until you are no longer sure they are open. He was lying on cold, wet stone. Above him, somewhere, was a single iron door, and it did not open. And slowly, as his ears adjusted to the silence, he realized the most terrible thing of all. He was not alone. The dark was breathing. All around him, packed into that underground pit, were other children. Dozens of them. Then, as the days passed and he learned to count by sound, he understood. There were hundreds. 300 stolen children, taken from roadsides and orphanages and the edges of sleeping villages, all of them dragged down into the same lightless hole. They had not been taken by slavers or by monsters. They had been taken by an assassin guild, and that guild had built this pit on purpose because they had discovered something monstrous about the human soul. A grown man is finished, set in his ways, but a child is soft clay. Break a child early enough, in the right kind of dark, starve it of warmth and hope and the sun itself, and you can mold it into a weapon that feels absolutely nothing. Pit was not a prison, it was a forge, and the children were the iron. The rules of the forge were spoken once, from the far side of the iron door, in a voice with no anger and no pity in it at all. Food would come, it would not come often, and there would never, ever be enough of it for everyone. The strong would eat, the weak would not. How the children decided which was which, the guild did not care. That was the entire lesson. There was no class, no master patiently teaching forms, just hunger and darkness and 300 terrified children and not enough food. The first time the bowls came down, the boy understood what was being asked of them. So did the others. The first night, the screaming went on for hours. He pressed himself against the cold wall, made himself small the way he always had, and he listened to the sound of children becoming something else in the dark. By morning, it was quieter. There were fewer voices than there had been the day before, and the guild, watching through their iron door, were pleased. This was the design. Every meal was a culling. Every night, a few more of the gentle ones simply stopped, and the ones who remained learned the lesson the pit had been built to teach: survive. Or feed someone else's survival. There is no third option down here. Most of the children broke. It is not a cruelty to say so. It is simply what happens when you take a small person and bury them in a nightmare. They wept for mothers who would never come, for a sky they would never see again, and one by one, the dark swallowed them. The boy with the blue hair did not break. He did something far more frightening. He adapted. While the others mourned the world they had lost, he studied the world he was trapped in. He memorized the pit by sound and by touch, every slope of stone, every narrow crack. He learned to move through total darkness without a whisper, the way he had once moved through crowded markets, unseen and unheard. And when the hunger became unbearable, he found the things that lived in the cracks of the pit. Snakes. Pale, blind, cold-blooded things that had also learned to survive without the sun. He learned to catch them in the dark with his bare hands, faster than they could strike. He learned to eat them raw and to keep down what his body wanted to reject. And he learned the hardest lesson of all, that when the food came down and there was not enough, the boy who hesitated was the boy who starved. So he stopped hesitating. He told himself it was survival. And it was. But every time he did it, a little more of the soft boy from the empty road went quiet and did not come back. The guild watched all of this through their door, and they smiled. They had found their 1 in 300. So they began at last to teach. Not kindness, not letters. They opened the door just enough to train what the dark had already sharpened. They taught the survivors how to end a life with their hands, quickly and quietly, in a dozen different ways. They taught them the wire, a thin, almost invisible length of steel that could be looped around a throat in the blink of an eye and would do its work in silence while the world slept on around it. They taught them poison, drawn from the venom of the very snakes that had kept the children alive in the dark, so that even the act of eating had been preparing them to kill. And alongside the weapons, they taught a philosophy. They taught that mercy is a wound you give yourself. That hesitation is just a slower way to die. That a beautiful, gentle, unthreatening face is not a weakness at all, but the finest weapon an assassin can carry, because no one is afraid of a beautiful boy until it is far too late. The blue-haired child drank all of it in. He had no reason not to. The men teaching him to be a monster were the only teachers he had ever known. And he was, his masters noted with quiet pride, extraordinarily gifted. He did not flinch. He did not waste a single motion. He killed the way water flows downhill, without effort, without doubt, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. They had wanted a weapon. They were building something much worse. They were building an artist. And somewhere in those years beneath the earth, in the dark and the blood and the endless cold, the boy stopped being a boy. The change came slowly and then all at once. His hair, starved of sunlight for so long, lost its color from the roots out until it hung pale and colorless as bone. His skin, which had not felt the sun in years, faded to the gray-white of a corpse. He had gone into the pit a living child. He was becoming something that looked like it belonged to the grave. And then came the serpent, a white snake, larger than the others, its venom strong enough to kill a grown man in minutes. It sank its fangs deep into his arm. He should have died. He did not. He lay in the dark and burned with the poison and refused, simply refused, to stop breathing. And when the fever finally broke, something had changed behind his eyes. The tired brown was gone. In its place was a deep, still, patient red. The color of old blood. The color of the thing he had become. When the guild finally judged their weapons ready and brought the survivors up from the pit, the children could not bear the daylight. They cried out and shielded their faces and cowered from the open sky, flinching like creatures dragged out from under a rock. They did not belong to the world above anymore. They belonged to the dark. And the dark, the guild believed, belonged to them. They loaded their finished weapons into caged wagons, like animals being carried to market, and they set out across the murim toward the work the children had been bred to do. The masters rode alongside, relaxed and confident, talking among themselves about contracts and coin. Why would they be afraid? They had spent years building the perfect tools, obedient, silent, empty. But here is the mistake they made. The mistake every man makes who believes that cruelty can be controlled. You cannot raise a creature in total darkness. Teach it that the strong devour the weak. Strip away every soft thing it was born with, and then be surprised when it looks at the hand that holds the leash and sees nothing but prey. It happened on an ordinary night. A camp, a few torches, the wagons drawn up in a circle. One of the masters opened a cage to give an order, the way he had 1,000 times before. And the boy with the red eyes was simply, already, behind him. The wire was around the man's throat before the torch beside them had even finished guttering. There was no scream. There was no warning for the others. By the time the rest of the guild understood that something had come loose in their camp, a third of them were already on the ground. He did not rage. He did not gloat, or weep, or hesitate. He moved through them exactly as he had moved through the dark for all those years. Silent, certain, without a single wasted breath. He took their weapons. He took their eyes. He gave back to them, with perfect precision, everything they had spent years teaching him to give. And when the camp was finally completely still, he walked out of it alone. He stepped into the open night under a cold and drifting moon, and he took the first free breath of his life. Behind him lay the men who had made him, and they would make no one else. Ahead of him lay the entire martial world, the murim, with all its proud sects and untouchable masters, an ancient, arrogant power. None of them knew it yet. None of them felt the ground shift beneath their feet. But on that night, in the silence after the killing, a reaper had been born. Not in a temple, not in a noble house, in a pit, in the dark, out of 300 stolen children and one guild's terrible ambition. The sword saints who believed themselves gods. The masters who slept soundly behind high walls. The whole glittering world that had let an orphan starve in its gutters and never once looked down. They were all, every one of them, already living on borrowed time. They had spent years and fortunes sharpening the deadliest blade the murim had ever seen, and now, at last, it had turned in their hands. The reaper of the drifting moon began to walk, and the moon followed him the way the dark always follows the things that it makes. He survived. He won. He took back every ounce of the freedom that was stolen from him on that empty road. But the gentle, blue-haired boy who only ever wanted to go unseen, the one who hesitated for a single heartbeat because a stranger smiled at him, that boy never climbed out of the pit. Something else wears his face now. Something patient and beautiful and very, very good at the only thing it was ever taught. So I will leave you with the question this story always leaves me with. The guild built a monster on purpose to do monstrous things. And when that monster finally turned on its makers and gave them exactly what they deserved, was that justice? Or was it simply the seed they planted in the dark, finally, inevitably bearing its fruit? Tell me what you think in the comments. I read them. And if you want more stories like this one, stories where the hero does not come back the same person who left, then follow Dark Manhwa Recaps. Because down here, in the dark, the ones who survive are never the ones who walked in.